All right. All right. There we are. Welcome back. Another week, another podcast. Am I right or am I right?
You're fucking wrong.
What's going on, everybody?
Be back at it again.
Got
Another
some-
segment.
Got some
Daniel is carrying us
hammy
through this
action.
week. Daniel's carrying us with the topics since some people have been dropping the ball, but no names.
It was one set of footsteps. You was carrying me.
Amen.
Name
But
that
yeah.
song.
We got Cam with us today. We got my boy Daniel, of course, and my boy DeAndre. You're running it up.
DeAndre,
Devin's
no
only showing
cap.
for one.
I thought that was a
Maybe
MAGA
Devin
hat.
will pop
I ain't gonna
in
lie
though.
to you. I don't know why. I give it a glance. I'm like, is that a MAGA hat? I'm like, DeAndre.
DeAndre's blooding
DeAndre
out
MAGA
right
hat.
now.
Hey, I got one. Y'all want me to put it on?
Yes, sir. These
Mega
riots.
troll.
I should buy a MAGA hat. Low key, they kind of like fuego. Like they look kind of go hard. I mean, if you ignore the text, they're like, yo, I'm gonna wear this hat one day. It's like, wear it in public. Ignore the text though. Like,
That's a Cam thing right there.
Bro said ignore the text.
Literally
You know,
what
like-
makes it that
put
kind
tape
of
over it.
Hey, that's what you should say on the fucking hat. Is ignore the text. Like
Ignore the text.
Ignore the text and admire the hat for the beauty and the shade of red in which it is. All right.
Give me one moment.
That shit got so quiet, bro.
Yes.
What up, everybody? It's your boy
Luke.
Daniel Nodge.
Luke, how many kids did you touch this week?
None. Never.
Off record, bro. Off record.
Don't touch any kids. Don't know.
That is
why
not
it's
what
a-
you told me, Luke.
That's really not what you were saying 2 seconds ago before we started this.
Okay.
You said
Actually,
you said you were in triple digits.
Let me
now.
read. Let me read some
Total.
of these texts from yesterday.
Pull them up, Daniel. Pull them up. Pull them up, Daniel.
All right, so Daniel, you want to kick us off?
All right. So today, May 30th, about, 5 hours ago, we had the launch of the SpaceX rocket. This is going to be my first topic. Let me just play it real quick.
I didn't actually see the clip, so
Yeah. Let me just play the liftoff here. Share sound. This. All right. Can you see it?
yep.
All right. So this is just the video of the liftoff. Little background, obviously. I mean, a lot of people know, but humans
Check
haven't lifted
the-
off from.
The other tabs. All right,
Yeah.
carry on.
All right. So a person hasn't lifted off from U.S. soil in like 9 years since the retirement of the space shuttles. So it's a pretty big
Yeah.
moment.
Also, isn't it like the first time it's been privatized as well?
Yeah.
or-
First time a
like,
company has launched people into orbit.
I was about to say
Right.
because yeah. Okay.
Yeah, obviously there's been privatized unmanned space missions, but
5, 4, 3, 2,
Here's the liftoff.
0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon.
And it went off without a hitch.
correct. That's what it seemed like when I was watching it.
Vehicle pitching downrange.
They lifted off.
They even
it
recovered
looked
the
insane.
rocket.
Yeah.
Stage 1 propulsion is
Recovery is in 15 minutes from here.
That's insane, man.
Yeah. But see, it shot
Where's
up real
this at?
quick.
Do you know?
Yeah, Cape Canaveral. They launched
Oh,
just
dude,
where,
Florida, right?
yeah, where
Okay.
everything's been lifting off mainly.
That's awesome.
Power telemetry nominal.
But liftoff went
We
perfect.
lost that live view.
So I'm a little uneducated on this. Do you know how
Stage 2.
the privatization works? Like SpaceX just is in contract with NASA, or like how
Yes.
is it?
NASA
Really?
has offered a contract to SpaceX and I think Boeing. But SpaceX is obviously the one that's ready right now.
You're seeing on your
See,
screen
what I enjoy about it is it makes it way cheaper.
first stage.
Because if you look at pretty much like any of the government contracts, private companies like when you're selling parts and stuff to the government, you honestly they usually charge the government more than they would charge like the civilian, like regular people, because they know the government's gonna pay,
Yeah.
And so like the fact that you're just starting to privatize the entire thing makes it way cheaper to go to space. So I know a lot of people are kind of iffy or against it, but like to me, it's a really good way to get right back into space again, because I mean, it's just so cool. Space exploration is so awesome.
Yeah.
And letting companies do it, they're going to find a way to make it profitable, and they'll end up having more and more missions, whereas a government agency is obviously going to be doing it for research, where they're probably not as prioritized on getting a bunch of launches up. But SpaceX, every time they launch, they're making money at this point. They're not losing. So their goal is to get as many launches up as possible, which is going to accelerate the process more and more.
That makes sense.
But here, it was 9 minutes after takeoff. This is the first stage, which took them up for like probably 50 miles up. I don't really know the math, honestly, but this took them way up and then landed back on this ship out in the middle of the ocean. And this is like their 50th landing already. So they're getting pretty good at it. One of their boosters has already lifted off 4 times or more. Whereas the first, so a lot of people talk about the space shuttle being reusable, but only the actual shuttle body was.
Correct.
Yeah.
The solid rocket boosters for the first stage were not reusable at all. Those were expended every time. And those were like hundreds of millions. So the fact that we were able to recover this first stage is incredible.
I'm telling you, man, as Luke was saying, when you start getting this down to like more of a like a science of like how we're gonna, get back some of these parts and make things more reusable and sustainable in like terms of space launch and space exploration. Fuck you. But
Thanks, launch.
go catch some kids. But when this starts becoming, like you said, like profitable, and there's more of these launches that are coming down and becoming routine, it's going to be really interesting to see what becomes the standard for exploration. Because like right now, it's like actually one of my high school alums just broke the world record for the longest space travel, like, or in orbit for like a female. She set the record like very handsomely as well. Like she beat it by like a lot. She's over there over a year. She was up in orbit, but stuff's cool.
What?
This stuff's awesome to me.
Imagine being in space for a year and then you come back to Earth. Like, what the heck?
It was insane.
DeAndre,
Yes.
what do you think?
I know you watched it, DeAndre. Tell me how you felt. Tell me your emotions at the time.
I feel happy because it's one of the only things that I trust humanity with progressing in. Actually getting
truth.
off of this planet and making scientific progression.
That is actually, no, that's a very good point you bring up, because I think like it has been a very, I don't know if this is going to segue into anything, but I think it's been a very dull like couple of weeks on top of a more even mundane year. You know, this is like the cherry on top, I think, with a lot of the recent things that have been going on in Minneapolis and, et cetera. So I think that thinking positively, it is really nice to see that we're not ruining everything just yet.
Hey, and this is our plan B if we do.
Jump ship, literally.
Just imagine 10 years ago, we had actual space shuttles, which were trash, right? Now we have this. What's 10 years from now? We might actually have people on Mars or the moon again within 10 years. Probably, almost definitely, actually.
Space shuttles were
highlight
really
on the again.
Again, yeah. It was 50 years ago last time. So don't know what's taken us so long.
That's what's so sad about it all, is like we made so much progress in such a small amount of time because we actually had people felt the drive, and then everyone just kind of lost it.
They're like, oh, cool.
It's like, oh, no Cold War. Let's pump the brakes. Nothing like a war to just fuel creativity.
We bankrupted the Soviet Union and almost ourselves, and we said, yeah, let's never do that again, which is really sad because we made a ton of progress.
Leave it up to colonization and social injustices to help progress humanity and machinery.
Every time.
Maybe that's the light at the end of the rainbow, you know? For like they say, they're like
That
yin,
is
there's
not
a
the
yang,
saying.
pros, the cons. Maybe we're just gonna have like super robots, you know, coming out now with like
I just can't help but think you said light at the end of a rainbow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we talk about that?
Because like at the end of a
Do you
rainbow,
know what a
usually
rainbow
there's,
is?
there's a pot of gold usually or
that
something.
was the saying. No, I definitely I definitely botched that
or
one.
like if you're talking about like the light at the end of the tunnel, I could have understood. But
That's what I meant. No, I have a habit. You probably don't even care, but I have a habit of
Don't.
mixing like several idioms all the time.
All right.
Well,
Well,
there's some kids.
I don't know why you say that, but like, does anyone
I
else
don't know
have
why
any?
you say that, bro. Like, chill, bro. I don't... As he sweats
I'm not sweating. I'm just booling, dude.
with some kids, you are, yeah.
Nope, no.
That's
children
true, by
are
the way.
involved.
That's true. He told me.
Yeah.
He tried to show me too, but I said no.
Does anyone else have anything to add on to the space? And not
I just
about
wanted to talk about how promising the future looks in this regard.
Question for everybody. What do we think is like realistic for the next 100 years? Like, what is a formidable like goal that you think is
interdimensional
accomplishable?
travel.
One
How many years?
accomplishable? 100. I'll give you a century.
Anything.
100 years is too broad of a span because technology
Way too much.
accelerates in such an exponential fashion.
That's true, but I think we're gonna see here. I think by the end of our lifetimes, more quicker than that. Like before we even really retire from the workforce, I think we're gonna start seeing that it's gonna plateau. I think that exponential curve.
I disagree. I think it's only going to speed up.
As
I
soon as we
disagree.
get the AI singularity, it's never, ever going to slow down. And that's within the next 50 years.
Well, the reason I say that is I think we're gonna see here, especially now after this quarantine ends, and we kind of get back to some normalcy. I think we're gonna see such a divide in generations now, where there's gonna be some people who almost want to simplify a little bit of things. And I'm not saying that's gonna last forever, but I think there is gonna be a phase we see by the end of our lifetimes where there's gonna be a push, or there's gonna be people advocating for like the good old days, or you know, like let's kind of pump the brakes a little bit. But I agree with you. Once we get AI up and running, and AI has become something that is not so foreign to us, and to like the extent in which we want it to be, then there's no slowing down any creativity.
I think it's kind of ridiculous to say like to suggest like generations are like saying, you know, like generations want to pump the brakes or like all that stuff because that's how it's always been. For as long as time has gone on, people like generations prior to the new ones have said like, oh, we don't need to do this, we need to be traditional and all that stuff. Like that's always happened.
Yeah, no, I agree. But the point I was really making is that I can tie it into something else, or give you an example to kind of like help like you envision what I'm trying to say. They say that, you know, one of the biggest things that's going on right now, like one of the biggest sociology or sociological studies or whatnot, is really just like looking into how politicians respond to like cues from different generations.
They don't.
And they don't. Yes, you're right. But out of all the generations in which they do, it is always the most elderly. So what you're seeing oftentimes is a lot of what are like the Gen Xers right now, or the baby boomers, a lot of what they're pushing for right now is often the times what you see most politicians advocating for. And coming into this new decade, I think it's really going to take a different view or a different spin in order to make the drastic changes in which we need to see in order to like improve not only our country, but like, you know, more abroad. But the way I think that ties in is you're going to see leaders. We have to have new leaders. It's just sense, you know, it's logical sense. And I think this new uprising generation is going to have a sense of urgency to kind of get back into the workforce and shake things up, coming from the lows, which has been quarantine and now, you know, these riots and, you know, yeah.
I think it's hard to, in my opinion, I don't like the whole concept of like pinning things on like the generations before us. I'm kind of going to disagree with you, Hammy, here when you say like I agree. Like obviously they don't take cues from younger people as much as they would older people. Like obviously that's not up for debate. But I think the simple fact of the matter is there's so many, like, the human population grows exponentially. And there's so many more younger people who don't use their voice like they should.
I completely agree.
And
We're speaking on the same page.
Yeah.
But
I think if people just use their voice more, then they'd have no choice but to listen to the younger
well, what
people.
it comes down to voting. People aren't registering. People aren't actually doing the things they do in order to make the politicians want to listen to them. Because if not, at the end of the day, if they're not voting for them, what's the point of appeasing what they want? That's their mentality.
I think you have half of it down. I think voting's a huge part. But after you vote someone into office, assuming you do register to vote and vote for who you think best represents you and not who other people press upon you, but once you vote for who you genuinely believe and whoever gets into office, it's also your responsibility, in my opinion,
To hold them accountable.
As a citizen, to hold them accountable.
I completely agree.
To do things like call your congressman, call your senators.
What is going on right now? What's going on right now is the epitome of what you just said, of holding people accountable. I think that's the biggest demonstration goal of what all these. And I'm sorry, we're veering off topic. This has no correlation to SpaceX, but
no, I like this new topic. It's gonna segue into my next topic.
Oh, sweet. What I was going was that they're not gonna be. It slipped my mind. It slipped my mind.
Yeah, you're fine. It happens, dude. I'm just a genuine believer in, like, electing people is not your duty as a citizen. And I think people have that common misconception that once I elect somebody or who I like, that things are going to get better. Because once someone's elected, it's not like they have an incentive to do much until election time comes around, whether that be in 2 years or
correct. 3.8 years, they can just sit around and do nothing.
You can apply that same mentality to the college athletic scandals, like with the NCAA. There's no incentive for players to want to go to college to play. Primarily, basketball is the biggest one because they have the biggest market per player in college. But when you're switching over to the professional sport or like going into the league, oftentimes you're seeing a lot of people just skip the NCAA entirely, and it's because there's no incentive. So like people always say, "Oh, I love college basketball," or "I love college football way much more," because they have an incentive to play. You want to get higher drafted, you want to get paid more, or you want to get those rookie deals. And I think if you don't, like, you can apply that to the I think politics.
I think they do have one big incentive, and that's a higher education, which I do think if you have the opportunity to strive for, you should.
But let's be real. If you're going to be a first overall draft pick in the NBA,
say, that's a troll
you really
pick.
think – and also not to mention several like prospects, like it's been exposed so many times. I'm not going to hate on my own university, but we've been guilty at times. But there's been other cases as well. I'll pinpoint, I think it was Arizona or wherever DeAndre Ayton came from. There was a huge scandal with him, and Memphis and James Wiseman. There's been illegal acts to try to lure them into the college, and once they're there at that university, they'll kind of put them through feeder classes or the most easy criteria to make them like skip by. So like, I can't really agree with you.
I think that's just
personally.
kind of a cyclical argument on both our ends, to be honest, because I guess when you take individual cases of where they are trying to feed people, through just so they can play and they don't have to worry about, like, obviously I'm not super familiar with college basketball. I'm more of a college football fan myself. I don't really watch basketball that much, but like, you just have cases like even they can't even make like NCAA like football games anymore because that people sued over them using their namesakes and lookalikes to make money off of them when they got no kickback.
The way I was relating this to is same thing to like the voter pool, because the incentive is hey, if I vouch for you, are you going to do me a favor? If I do you a favor, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So if we're going to these places and we're traveling the country, speaking to these people, and they're saying we want this or we want that, if I appease you guys, are you guys going to return me in votes? And are those votes going to be substantial enough to get me elected? But as you said, once you're elected, there's no incentive to do so. So it's a trade. And I think Luke just left.
He was just
No,
talking
I'm
to his
here.
mom.
Yeah.
Oh, you're fine. But yeah, sorry, we got a little off topic. If you want to,
Luke, I think you're kind of trolling by saying that college athletes are only playing sports to get a free college education, bro.
I didn't say that.
that's a big troll.
I didn't say that.
You're saying something very close to that.
No.
You want it? We can give you a second chance to redeem yourself.
I was going
If
to
you
say,
wanna restate.
personally, I feel like people, if given the opportunity, should be enthusiastic about seeking higher education.
Oh yeah, I completely agree.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Especially if they come from lower, But I think the big grab as well for them is they want to put themselves in a position to where they can, provide for their family or those around them. And I think for them, they see their physicality and athleticism as the door to that. And it's a much quicker route than waiting 4 years for a diploma or a degree and then going into the workforce. But I will say, you see a lot of cases, and I think you see a lot of them in the NFL, which is surprisingly, which you wouldn't guess with the how contact heavy the sport is for football. But you see so many football players who would jump ship from football and go into career paths. I know I can't remember the name or team, but there was just a lineman or a linebacker who just now is instead of doing the virtual work camps, he's in the hospitals helping people or treats people or diagnose people for corona. And there's a lot of cases where you'll see surgeons, people who are have got their MD but they play in the NFL. So I agree with you. If I was in their shoes, I would want to also seek higher education, just because I know so many people have been denied that for so long. Just having that opportunity is something I wouldn't personally deny, but I also see the flip side of that.
Correct, but I'm glad you mentioned what you did, that last point, because being a professional athlete is a gamble, and you can't say that it's not, because you can get injured the first professional game of your career and be done the rest of your life. And there's no way to predict that. There's not really a good way to prevent it, seeing as injuries happen. Yeah, you can stretch and you can prepare and you can train all you want, but the name of professional sports is, that comes with injuries.
I agree. But you can't get injured in politics.
Well,
They might beat you on the Senate floor.
or you might get
JFK.
shot.
Yeah.
They beat him up pretty
or
bad.
Abraham Lincoln, or Garfield was another assassinated president, right?
They beat them up a little bit.
Yeah, but it's a different type of risk.
Yeah,
Is it though?
Filibuster.
I would say so.
that's not a risk.
It's not a risk.
Bet.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that topic, though. If you wanted to move us on, Daniel, move us right along.
All right. So my main topic for the night, this was an extremely, extremely hot take.
Event.
Shout out to my boy Malcolm X here. Does anybody want to explain my topic? Might do it a little better, DeAndre?
Nah, you
Why
got it.
DeAndre?
Me?
Why DeAndre? I'll play it.
Because DeAndre and I. Hey.
I'll play it. But
My
trust you,
point
Daniel.
was, I was tasked with finding a topic this week, and speaking of everything that's going on right now, I think this is a pretty important topic. Let me scroll up. Seeing as police organizations are not being held accountable generally, some are not. You could argue that most are not,
Cam,
probably.
what is this, bro? I'm sorry, Daniel.
Jeez, what is shit on Daniel like that?
The chat going crazy.
Wait, Luke, did you just? Luke just. This is Luke. He just did this in the bathroom mirror last
That
night. He
is
sent it to me.
definitely Cam.
Yo, what? Luke crazy.
I cannot
Black
believe
kid.
Luke did that and sent that online.
I don't
Honestly,
condone that.
honestly,
That
did
is
not send that.
atrocious.
honestly, hot take. Blackface, kind of brave right now. Doing blackface, kind of brave. Now,
oh
That's
my
not
god.
It's not a hot take. I mean,
I mean, all right. Okay, there's no way I can stop this out, making it not sound bad. Never.
nah, keep going. Keep going.
No, no,
Let's
do
get back to
not.
what
Stop
let's
it.
get back
Just
to what
let's stop
Daniel
it.
was saying. Let's
All right.
avoid this.
But here, let me share my screens to make this more. But if you look at America, obviously we're a country with heavy gun ownership.
Oh shit. Pull up the
But you
chart.
see a strong divide here. I can't zoom in. Between white people and black people here. 49% of white households own a gun. 32% of black households.
High school or less. God damn. What's going on there?
Oh, this is education levels. This is not
Oh,
age.
I'm about to say.
Oh, I was about to say. I was
I'm
what?
like, damn, what's going
But
on?
my point is you can hold people accountable if they're a little scared to be violent towards you, in a sense. But I had some statistics I
Jesus
pulled
Christ, you just also got a notification on your desktop, apparently.
out. No, I didn't.
Okay.
All right. So one thing. Okay, so this dark green bar here is people who personally own a gun, the percentage. And then this light green is they don't own a gun, but someone in their household does. So this is kind of off topic, but you can see there's a huge gap here. A lot of men own guns. Meanwhile, women don't, but their household does generally. I don't know why that is. Another thing, the racial divide, obviously I pointed out, almost 50% of white households, meanwhile, black households down to like a third of gun ownership. The urban-rural divide here is especially prevalent. 29% of people in cities own guns or households. Meanwhile, in rural and suburban areas, percentage is much higher, where in these urban areas are where you see a lot of police brutality incidences. Obviously, in rural areas, you have other instances, but the ones that are heavily, heavily publicized with cops on an unarmed black man are in urban areas generally. And then you can see here, there's a political divide. 57% of Republicans have a gun in the household, Democrat 25%, Independents near 50%. And then, so my point for this was for obviously self-defense protection. And the reasons for people to own a gun generally is protection. So increasing gun ownership would make sense if that is the reason people own them, more protection. Those are the statistics I wanted to point out. And one more is, all right, so out of all adults in America, 48% say they grew up in a gun household, but only 42% now. So there's a drop in 6% from when they grew up. Why is that percentage dropping when you see times like now where it seems like they might help more? Those are the statistics I wanted to point out. DeAndre told me he wanted to talk about this topic. So I think we're going to hand it over to DeAndre now that some stats are thrown out there.
So can you go back actually to that urban and rural part?
Yeah, right here.
All right. So before I bring up my points, like you said, it's strange that the most ownership is in the places where things like this aren't happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I did learn, because I had the poli-sci class last semester, since there's such a high concentration of Black people in urban areas and less in rural, so the population density in urban areas, and then a good portion of it being Black, and then that corresponds with the lower ownership of Black guns. And because if mostly rural, then there's less of them out there. So there's more white people, which would own more of the guns, according to the statistics. So that could explain that bottom half. So,
So you're saying the urban numbers and the minority numbers are probably connected.
Yeah. And
because of
also,
demographic concentrations.
yes, and urban areas also tend to be heavily like democratic. So
Mhm.
of course, not necessarily guns. And then rural areas are the ones that are mostly like conservative or Republican. So that could be another reason why they own more of the guns. But the main thing I wanted to like talk about, I talked about this with Cam one time. It was like a long time ago. So if everything keeps popping up, it had to come to light. All right. So there's the argument, of course. I see people going back and forth on like social media between, well, who was right, Malcolm or Martin Luther King? But then, of course, there's everyone else like, you should listen to both of them because a lot of people were talking about how Malcolm used force, but a lot of people were talking about how Martin Luther King had more of an impact. So people's argument against Martin Luther King was, well, he got assassinated. Well, Malcolm also got killed. So like,
Correct.
Correct.
if you
They both
look
got
at that,
assassinated.
yes, if you look at that, none of their approaches, it's not the way you approach, it's what you do, because both of them were impactful, but it just wasn't enough, as you could see, to just change the minds of such a majority in society. So it was a topic I wanted to think about. So increasing black ownership of guns. It's a good idea and it's a bad idea because of course, this is what I talked with Cameron about. There's always gonna be people that hop on the yes or hop on the no way too quick.
Without
But they
thinking.
don't yes, but they don't realize there's a lot of in between that you could approach it the right way and still get what both sides want. So what I think is right now, yes, it is smart to have more ownership of guns in the black population because there's no equal ground to defend yourself right now. And that's the main point. It's not just to carry it around all the time. It's just the fact that they have nothing to even the grounds. If a cop pulls up on you, they immediately have the weapons, they have the numbers against you. There's like nothing you can do. So that's why I wanted to support it on that side. Um, Little known fact, when the Black Panthers owned weapons, when they were the majority that
I
owned
know
weapons,
what you're going to say. This is a
yeah,
very good point.
the NRA supported gun control at that time
Yes. This was in
because
the, I think, 60s through 80s.
yes, because they wanted to get them out of the hands of Black people. They didn't want the oppressed to have the guns. And of course, now that the majority is white, they really don't condone that gun control. They focus more on, well, it's the amendment right. Everyone should protect themselves. But that's because it's under white ownership. So if you're doing nothing to stop the onslaught, first of all, and if you're facing a bully, if you do nothing, nothing's going to be accomplished because eventually you're going to have to stand up. And you want to even that playing field because even if you know you don't have the upper hand, you got to fight back somehow instead of sitting there and taking it, which is what has been happening for generations after generation. But this is where I come with hesitancies. This is where I took notes. My only concerns with increased ownership, if a Black kid, the first one's situational. If a Black kid is armed when approached by a policeman, then that's more societal justification for the cop to shoot at them.
Right. He's not unarmed anymore is what people would say.
Yes. So if more people are licensed to carry them, then that's giving cops more of an opportunity to kill them. Another thing I want to address was technicalities. There's always going to be somehow they get illegal acquisitions of guns. They're going to come in with things they shouldn't have. They won't have registered weapons. They won't have a license to even have them. Police already frame unlawful possessions. So if they found more unlawful possession somewhere, they could frame that to their advantage. Say like if a shooting happened and they found no evidence but certain bullets, they could automatically say, well, we found this unregistered gun and then link it back to somebody that had no involvement with the crime.
Mm-hmm.
Third, this is one that I felt deep. White people already subliminally associate black people with weapons and violence. So, unless media presented consistent and responsible use by black people, then that public that's already scared will just be driven further into that mindset. All right, if more blacks have guns, a lot more whites are going to be encouraged to do the same. So now that it's deemed a necessity or acceptable, it's dangerous because if they have a public fear, they'll be able to do something about it rather than just call the police about it. So if they're scared of an armed black man, now since they're armed and they also own a gun, they may do something about it before they even get law involved.
Yes, they might get even more scared and freak out, and something tragic would happen.
So then that would take police out of the whole situation, and it would just be back to the individual thing about how they view people. Another point, arming black people, this is the biggest one I want to make, and then a final one after it. Arming black people without fundamental or institutional changes will not change their condition. So people in situations like me or like more well-off conditions, I live in this rural area, but we're pretty well off here. There's not much like struggle around here. It's not as worse as in some places. A lot of people here, they own guns, just like the rural statistic. So it's evident here. But there's still, and people with worse off situations in more impoverished places, there's still that anger, that fear, and that struggle to survive that they're born with that's very prominent in those neighborhoods. And people in those neglected conditions or that can't escape that survival mentality that society pushed them into, giving them guns will fuel the self-violence that institutions created in the first place. So that would make more black on black crime because they still have that survival instinct. They would encourage us to commit crimes against each other. And then that would be what they showcased in the media as a representation of us, proving them right instead of showing everyone else that uses it responsibly or carries it to just protect themselves. They would just show that, oh, we gave them more guns and see what they did with it just because of the conditions they're in. So if you gave them guns without changing foundational things, infrastructure, everything like that, it wouldn't make a difference and would actually make it a little worse for them. And then the final point, good policemen exist, black policemen exist. Some have even stood against their own departments in this situation. These people dedicate their lives to service. They have families, but depending on the situation or intensity, none of that matters once someone sees the uniform or the badge. All they see is a threat and a symbol of something they're against. Because cop killers also exist. And if they got the chance before the officer did to defuse the situation, they're going to shoot the officer just because they can. They do have the protection now. And there's not going to be a true winner there because, again, that cop has family, and then that black person is just feeding into what society already viewed them as. But on one end, they were protecting themselves, and on one end, they were just doing their duty. But just the way media frames it right now and the way generations have seen it, once they see just that uniform or that badge, it's going to be an immediate reaction of who pulls first because now the citizen is armed. So they have to do something on both sides, and nobody knows how it's going to end up. And that's really all I had on that.
Very well said, DeAndre.
Thank you.
Luke, do you have anything to add? I have some points, but I wanted to see if you would go first.
Go for it. It's honestly a lot for me to like. I would have to break it down into individual parts and talk about it like each individual part of the argument, because that's a lot and it was all very well put together. So it's hard to address the whole thing as one.
Yeah, I suffer from the kind of exactly what you were saying, Luke. And even more so, I think I can give a unique perspective coming from biraciality, because I think my narrative, being solely a few skin tones lighter, or just the slightly less of more pigmented than people like DeAndre or Cameron, I think it's sad but true that society has spun already such a different narrative tied to our skin tone, and I think the way that it portrays into this and what we're seeing now is that I completely agree with DeAndre, who was saying that you need to really stop and think. And, there's people on both sides of the spectrum saying, Martin was right, MLK was right, or Malcolm was right. But I agree with saying, look where that both got them. They both got to the same place. But they were both great leaders. And I think if you really look at the commonalities between the two of them and see what really galvanized people in society and what really pushed us forward as a nation, and the advancements that were made at their time, if you really string those together and look at those together, what do you really see? You see that you need it's step by step, because I want to hesitate, and I'm trying to say this very slow when I go, because it's the smallest of details that I think help perpetuate racism through institutionalizations. And I think I agree that given the current situation, theoretically, in a non-violent world, theoretically, MLK's approach should work. I think nonviolence in a perfect world would be ideal. You don't fight fire with fire. You're able to move forward in a nonviolent manner, because I think we could all agree that we don't want bloodshed. That's never really the case. That's not what we're gunning for with arming people. That's not what we're going for with anything. But I want to say that I think the first step that a lot of African-American individuals need to take in this nation is to first do the simple thing to register to vote. And you have to know, and I think it's a sad, not expectation, but it's a bare minimum. Our baseline as Blacks in America is tremendously much higher than the whites has to be for situational awareness, which is very sad, I think. When you step outside your door, you immediately feel like there's so much more eyes that I feel like that are on you, and you have to be so much more careful about the way that you live your life that it helps trip you up sometimes. And what I'm referring to when I say you're tripping yourself up is that survival instinct that DeAndre mentioned. I read a story about this man who taught at a university, but he was stopped by a police officer during his lunch break because they had a case that they described somebody that looked similar to him, and he was innocent. Nothing happened. But he said that as soon as he's engaged in the conversation with the police, he had the feeling that he knew that this was going to be the last day he lived. And it's that gut-wrenching feeling of your survival instinct that kicks in when I think all else just clears. You don't have your normal cognitive abilities to just process the situation. And I think that's oftentimes a lot what we're seeing. We're seeing police put Blacks in a corner to where they have no escape route, and it really only perpetuates it through a top-down approach. And we're seeing people who, and DeAndre, I think all three of us, DeAndre, Cam, and I, are all fortunate enough to not really be faced with this, living in a rural area much more than an urban inner city Black. But it's those visuals who are.
Can I make a point real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say we're in a rural area, but it's not an area with a strong divide. So like you might see in the deep South.
Yeah.
It's actually very nice here from my
It's
perspective.
very mild and calm. I agree. And I also think the police, this is another point off topic, but I think the police around here are much more mild and more acceptable around here. I think a lot of them do a good job. But back to what I was saying. I think really what we're going to have to see, because the people at the bottom of the spectrum, the people that are in those inner cities, are the ones that are getting impacted by this most, because it's that survival instinct that kicks in, and it's the willingness to just get the bare minimum, your necessities that you need to survive, that's causing more black on black crime. So if you're giving, guns in the current social dynamic to those individuals who are in those situations, it's only going to make it worse, and it's only going to further institutionalize racism and accept it more so in America than it already is. But I think it's the hidden agenda of a lot of law enforcers that really mess over, because I think what DeAndre pointed on kind of hits the nail on the head. You really see that it's one bad apple that rottens the bunch. You see one case like that, and look what it did in Minneapolis. We've seen it time and time again, whether it be LA, whether it be Minneapolis. We've seen this so many times, even our own state. We've seen this in Wilmington years back. And the story never changes. It's just a different victim another day. And it's sad to say, and over time, you don't really learn your lessons. But I think what we're missing is that you have to come at this from a dual approach. You have to start from the top down, where that power exists already, and you're going to have to make changes. And if that change doesn't, that's the first step. If you're not able to change the way that these police encounters happen, the protocol in which they happen, the responsibilities of the first responders, the need to respond for medical care before they go into the more of the criminal analysis, because I'll use George Floyd for example. You see that they neglected medical care that was on the scene, telling the officers this man needs medical care. They had neglected those facts, and they ignored those facts, and that led to his death. And I think that before anything should become for anything. I don't care, and you may disagree with me on this, but I think no matter what crime it really is, I think if the person is not in a stable condition, I don't think you should go on with any arresting, or there shouldn't be anything that is taken on in that place, because I think the highest 100%. Right you should have. The highest right you should have as a human being is the access to just medical care, and to know that you at least can be able to leave the situation. If I was in the shoes, like, I could only even imagine what was going on in his mind, knowing that, he was going to be taking his last breaths on the streets of Minneapolis, crying for his mother, saying that he cannot breathe, bleeding through his nose.
He's from Houston, by the way, far away from his
Houston.
Home.
Yes, he moved there to have a better life. But one of my last points I was really going to say is about right now, when you're seeing a lot of the rioting going on, and there's a big difference between the protesting, and I think that's what you can say is the equivalency of a MLK approach versus a rioting, which I say you could say is a Malcolm approach. And you can see even still, and it's sad to say, but neither of those are even working. And I think really what you're going to have to see, again, like I said, is you're going to have to say, and it's sad to say this, but people aren't going to listen to the I quote, boy who quiet cries wolf. You're going to have to see it from, most likely it's going to have to be a white male, from top down, and really start that change that way and get the ball rolling, so that people who are prominent, they can use their status. And I commend all the celebrities, black celebrities, that have jumped on this cause and used their platform to spread this awareness. But a lot of it's going to have to come from the whites who can, because you can't really do it alone, because it like I said, it's the philosophy that one bad apple can rot in the bunch. I think that if you for every 9 good interactions that a police would have with a black person, the one bad one is the one that's going to get dramatized, and the people who do subconsciously, and it's sad to say that exist, think that you look at a black person, the first thing that you're probably going to think, or you're gonna see somebody who, like, you think of violence, and you think of something along those lines, and that narrative has to be spun differently in order for us to really make advancements. And the way you do that, I think, is really just have voices in the community that can be heard in a respectful manner from both parties, being both black and white. And I hesitate on a lot, like what I say, because it's hard, because there's so many. Like Luke pointed out, you could have so many different topics that really divide down into this. But at the end of the day, I think the overlying call is that we need to band together against the enemy, really, is what's just is injustice. And it's to a point where they're so empowered to make change, that it's your corner, and the only escape is through a combination of both approaches. You want to be able to provide protection for those blacks in the inner cities, especially, and you want to be able to say they would probably benefit from gun rights, and their rights for possession. But it's that same right that can be spun so easily to advance the killing of blacks and to promote that same killing. So you want to tread lightly in whatever you say or do. So it's a very sensitive topic, and I think that really the right first step to do is to identify the problem, which I think we're doing currently. I know all five of us probably know, if you go on any social media handle right now, you're going to see it everywhere. And I think that's the right first step really that has to be taken. But do I think that looting and rioting alone or peaceful protest is the right solution? I do not. I don't think targeting and burning down Targets and McDonald's or whatever has been really going on, punching police in the face, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's definitely not when you're going to be outnumbered. And, like I said, you're going to have to, it's sad, but you're going to have to take a step back for a second, I think, really, and kind of just analyze the situation and then act accordingly. But everybody's first instinct is we have to jump on this now. We have to go streets. We have to riot because, they're killing blacks currently. There's more stories that pop up, and there's people who are dying in the riots even. There's people there's so many arrests that are going on. And I think it's also a good point to note that it's not just blacks that are experiencing this; it's all minorities. We get dramatized the most because of the systematic racism that has been installed in our situation or our country since the beginning of its creation. But I saw a case that was very similar where a cop shot an unarmed deaf man because he was making signs, signing to him. So there's other minorities that experience the same type of bias because of stereotypical predetermined assumptions of their demographic that's causing them to be the victim in most of these cases. And you can't really change that until I think the media has so much power that they're not rightfully utilizing, and then you're gonna have to see a top-down approach. That's kind of like my last point.
Very well said again.
I do want to
Oh yeah, go ahead, DeAndre.
All right, you can go right after me. I just want to make a point. Just to go off of what Hammy said, it is definitely top down. Daniel knows I talk about it all the time. You can say whatever, you can stand for whatever, but without the actions or without follow through, nothing's gonna happen. So just like Hammy said, Hammy knows too. All of them know. I try to live my life. I love everybody. I'm open to everything. Everybody can hate me, but I'm going to still love them. But I'm going to be so strong that I'm going to be undeniable. And even if you hate me, I won't hate you back. It just won't bother me. And that's how I feel like everyone has to move as a unit with that love in mind, but you have to be undeniably strong. And I feel like everyone also just has to actively live against it. We have to go top down, like Hammy said. And in the meanwhile, you have to actively live against it, and you have to do the things yourself in your day-to-day life, and you got to go against the grain to make the change.
I have another point, real quick. It's really, I don't know the right word for it, but kind of just speaking bluntly, you see so many small acts of racism or so many small acts of oppression that occur in every single day in the daily lives. And the thing that's so overwhelming, I think, is that it's everywhere around us in every single institutional government sponsored acts. If you look at the education system that exists, if you look at just the police force that exists, it exists in medicine, exists in every single thing you can think, or every single statistics, you can find numbers that really just demonstrate racism or oppression or bias. And you can go on about any different really demographic and kind of pinpoint their struggles. And I think one of the most important tools that we need to really better utilize, I think,
Daniel,
is
you're
that
still screen sharing. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I'm
not
gonna get to
to
this.
not to outcry, like I'm gonna use the boy cries wolf. You don't want to outcry other victims. Oftentimes I think what happens also is that it's like the biggest thing I see all the time are surrounding the Black Lives Movement or the Black Lives Matter movement versus the All Lives Matter movement is people always saying, well, like, all lives matter, you know, like, yes, I think everyone agrees that all lives matters. That's not really the point.
Yeah.
And nobody
But
disagrees with that. It just doesn't need to be said.
yeah, the example that people have been using off the time is if you have 5 kids and one kid's damaged themselves or injures themselves and you have one Band-Aid, you're going to give the Band-Aid to them, you know, because they're feeling that pressure or they're feeling that hurt right now. And that's the Blacks during this time. So when the statement Black Lives Matter is not to shine light on the facts or is not to like put Black people on a pedestal. It's just to acknowledge the fact that they are being oppressed right now. And, you know, they're the ones that need that aid or they're the ones that need that support at the time. So I think oftentimes you play the game of we're more minority or, you know, we're the smaller, we're more oppressed. And that's not really, you're never going to win if that's the mentality that you carry with you. Like DeAndre thinks, I think we have to be so mentally strong, even through the toughest of times, even though it is people's family members being killed by police, or if it is acts of racism that are leading to false accusements. I just saw the other day, this man was sentenced falsely to rape. You might have saw him. He was on America's Got Talent. He's like blowing up now. He served years for a false rape and DNA proved him innocent. And it's things like that you can't take away that make you really realize that it's not there's things that are bigger, you know, sometimes than just who's more oppressed or, you know, who's the bigger victim. You know, there's a commonality between all of them and that they are oppressed or that they are victims. So I think the tool that we need to utilize more is that we all are in that same playing field. So we need to use that as leverage in order to band together.
100%.
Luke, you wanted to say something?
I guess really the only thing I really wanted, because there's a lot there, so it's really hard for me to break down, especially like it's kind of like an outside looking in. Like obviously I can't relate like others can relate, and I won't pretend like I can. But on the concept of, I guess, the overall like the question of like that Daniel originally presented, you know, like arming Black populations and stuff like that. I think it's important to look at not just the Second Amendment here, but how we treat the other amendments. The Second Amendment is an option. It doesn't say you have to own a gun, and it doesn't say you can't own a gun. It gives you the option to. Just like the government also gives you the option to rightfully, you know, to peacefully protest and to practice your own religion, or the right to and accept an attorney, but you don't have to. You have the right to own a gun, but you don't have to. So I feel like that there are questions proposed, like, not that this is how far you guys were suggesting about going, but, you know, like, should we arm certain populations? I think that speaks to a testament more of we need to be asking, why do we want to arm these populations? Because if we're asking those questions, then we clearly see the injustice. And
I completely agree.
And
100%.
I think it's really important at that point. I mean, as a police officer, you're supposed to de-escalate the situation. You're the professional. You are the professional, not whoever's on the other, you know, not who you may be arresting or not who you may be, you know, talking to. It's not up to them. It's up to you. And I think that the fact that we have to ask this question or propose, you know, should we arm these? You know, what are the repercussions if we do or if we don't? You know, is this going to keep happening? I think that speaks more volumes as to what actually is occurring. And I think that's when we need to look at, because you shouldn't, the government doesn't encourage you one way or the other to get an attorney or not to, or at least they shouldn't. It should be a simple fact of the matter is you offer one, or just like, you're allowed to go protest. We're not going to tell you you have to, and we're not going to tell you that you can't. But it's an option. And I think that's how we need to look at, you know, we look at the, you know, we're kind of missing the forest for the trees if we look at the Second Amendment different than we look at all the other constitutional amendments, if that's what we're basing it off of. But I think all of it, the point I'm trying to make really is it's an institutional change that needs to be made. To say, I know there's the common, police officers protect and serve. Clearly that's not happening how it should be. Even if 99.9% of the times it is happening how it should be, 0.1% is not acceptable to me. And I don't think it really should be. Obviously we're humans and no one's going to be perfect, but I think you need at least
each 0.1 is another death.
Right. It's a human life that'll never be replaced. So as a police officer, you can't afford to make that mistake. And I guess I can't understand either situation. I really can't. Never been there, I've never been a minority in the United States, and I've also never been a police officer who's scared. But I can't defend stuff like this. I can't defend you. I can't defend the police force in general recently with all the wrongdoings, just because it feels more than 0.1% even.
It is. I can tell you for a fact it is.
Yeah.
And so I really and truly, it's got to be an institutional change. I think people are, should we change this or should we change that? To me personally, it's my opinion. But I don't feel like there is a question. I feel like it's pretty obvious that it's time for a change. The fact that another thing, like the police officer got arrested yesterday or today, right? Something
yesterday.
Like that. Yesterday. When did it happen? Had any of us done that in this situation, as soon as they found us, we would have been behind bars. Why are they held? Why are they looked at differently? Even if one of us did something where the lines were blurred and law enforcement didn't know if we committed a crime, which we know this officer committed a crime. That's not the question. But even if there was question on if any of us committed a crime, you still are arrested, Mm-hmm. So what took so long?
And in addition to that, this kind of speaks to the institutional problem. This cop had 18 other cops report him over his career of instances where he abused his force, and the police force never did anything. And also, y'all didn't know, a lot of people don't know this, but he's been involved in several other shootings where people have died. Like, he's killed people, and nothing has been done.
That was the exact point I was going to bring up, Daniel. And it gets it's really sad. That's kind of the only word I could kind of say is that this stuff flies by under the radar, and it's only brought to light when something like this happens, when it is an injustice. Why is that the case? We're asking all the right questions. I think just in this discussion, each of the four of us who've said anything, we've all asked the right questions. All four of us are saying, Luke, you just pinpointed on something really good about the amendments and the way we view them. But it's, in my opinion, it's the same way if we look at it, we can apply that concept to any other profession. If you look at a surgeon, right? Pretend the surgeon's the cop, the patient being the person who's being arrested. When you're in the middle of a surgery, let's say you're doing open heart surgery. If you botch that surgery and your patient dies, you can't get that back. That's the ultimate sacrifice. And you're the professional. That's on your hands. Your hands are bloody. That's the same way you see if that happens all the time in the medical field, where you see surgeons or practicing physicians getting their license revoked. Why is that not the same for police force? How come is it that the same policeman can go person from person and be involved in several killings? You can't get those people's lives back, and nothing's happening. And the fact that there was also 100 policemen who guarded his house. I don't know if you guys saw that. There was 100 policemen that guarded the cop's
instead of arresting
house.
him.
Instead of arresting him. And one of the questions I posed too that I think is really interesting to think of is, you can make citizens arrests, right? What would have happened, do you guys really think, if
that
a citizen
strongly
would
depends
have,
on the state, though, by the way. I don't know
I
anything about Minneapolis.
I
Some
acknowledge
states
that
you
as well.
can't do it at all. Okay.
I agree. Yeah, that's true. But what would have been the case had you either, and this will get to the point, Luke, in the states where you can make a citizen's arrest, what would have been the case if you could have arrested those cops that are doing that situations, that are saying, hey, this is a crime within itself. Or more so for the states that is illegal and you're not allowed to do so. What would have been the case if had I called the cops on a cop? All these
Which
things
you're
are still
legally
possible,
allowed to
and
do, by
you're
the way.
allowed to do. Yes, you're allowed to do that. So in a predicament like that, I feel like that's probably would have been the steps I would have taken, because if you get personally involved, that's only going to fuel, I think, the hatred or whatever's going on in that scene. But like that's the question I was really propose is like, they use their leverage, they use what they're entitled to as leverage against us, and what if that narrative was spin around on them? Because like there is good cops, like DeAndre said, that exists out there. So like, why are these things taking place? I think I'm a firm believer. I think there should be a one strike policy for all police officers. If you mess up once, you should be gone, in my opinion. Like
Agreed. You can't, like I said, you can't afford to make those mistakes. I completely agree.
You're not allowed to. This isn't a sport. It's not like arrest. They look at it like it's game almost, like they're hunting.
Yeah, it's not Call of Duty.
It's despicable, and it's just it's something that's mind blowing to me. It makes me really upset. I like about this. But it's insane to me that we treat, and sometimes we treat animals better than humans. You can get better police respondents for a dog than you can than some human beings, which to me is just so backwards and inhumane. But police officers in themselves have a tendency to band together. Police officers, like, they share that badge. So they share that uniform. They're those people in the uniforms behind those scenes. So they have a tendency to band together, and that's what we see. But why is it that no one else is really noticing what is going on? And there's so many corrupt, like, instances. And we can also talk about, like, mob ties, things like that. That's another story. But, like, the system and their first responders, those are the people you call in your immediate danger.
They're supposed to help. Their first priority is to help other people.
That is the baseline for what all policemen are supposed to be doing. If you put police officers like that in any of these situations, how can you trust them to handle any situation accordingly? It's the same things. It's like the officers that you see are in schools. A lot of the like inner city schools, you see police officers that serve in the schools. Like, how can you trust them to keep a body of people safe like that when you see, again, it could be that 0.1%, but that 0.1% is still another person's life that you cannot get back. You cannot take those things back from them. You can't take those years that are wrongly served in prison in case if it's a wrong indictment. You can't do that. So you're not able to afford to miss the mark. Like, we're questioning each time, like, why are we doing it? But we're not taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and saying, like, why are all these things taking place on a grand scale?
I want to hop on that real quick, because you just made me think of, like, a beautiful example for what you're saying. It shouldn't be like this in the first place. These people shouldn't be the ones that are representing what police officers are, because all of like, the officers we had in our school, I knew all of them. I loved them to death. They knew all of my family and everything. I love all of them.
Mike Law.
But, yes. But when I was a sophomore, and everybody in the podcast knows, when I was a sophomore after that final exam day, and I was walking through our neighborhood, and I got pulled up on by an officer, and as soon as I looked through that windshield and saw him point at me like this, I was scared for my life. Like, I know everyone in this county, and I love them, but as soon as that situation arises, everything I've seen that had never happened to me all rushed to me immediately. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And it happened again. Like, they didn't pull up on me like that since that lady had called thinking somebody had taken pictures of her house. But another event was something so simple. Y'all know I like animals and stuff. I was younger than this, and I was at my mailbox in the ditch, like, catching tadpoles. And I just see wheels, like, roll in front of me and then slow down. And when I looked up, it was a cop car. And without even getting to the person in the car, I was like, what's about to happen. Because why are they stopping? And I'm just catching tadpoles. I shouldn't fear for my life just because of everything that other cops have represented. Like, it's just got to be a fundamental change in the system.
Yeah, that hits home for me too. There was an instance where my brother was drunk and was running around the neighborhood just drunk. He wasn't driving, nothing really illegal going on. But my mother just called because she had lost my brother. My brother just ran off running around the neighborhood. My mom, who's white, called the police, and this was describing my brother. And the one thing that, she was telling me this the other day, the things that she described to the police officer was just like what he looked like, his hair, his height, things like that. But she begged the police officer to not shoot him, to don't use violence against him. He's just my drunk biracial son who's running around the neighborhood. There's no force that needs to take place. Please just get him.
Just holler at me if you know where he is.
Just do your job. Basically, is what we're preaching, but they're not practicing it. And another thing I want to point out, going off DeAndre's story, was that, again, I want to reiterate that my experience, being a lighter skin tone or biracial, is still different. But I think a lot of what we see going on is taught. It's taught through the experiences that we visually encounter, that we hear, or that we're taught, or we're taught ourselves through school. And we see it when, growing up in the news, we see this or we hear this, and it's the smallest cues growing up that kind of amalgamate into that fear that DeAndre experienced when he was just trying to catch tadpoles. That doesn't exist when you're born. None of that exists when you're born. You don't come into this world with hate. You don't do that. That's taught, and it's taught through other instances of hate. So that's why I say that it's impossible to fight that with more hate. So you're never going to you're never going to come from peace with fire. You know what I'm saying? That's not going to happen. So yeah, I don't want to reiterate my solution, but yeah.
And that experience, I was telling Daniel, we had our first orientation session, right? So we had a debrief afterwards with the whole team and our professional staff. And of course, it being an orientation crew, it's very diverse, LGBTQ, Indian, Black, everyone, right? So we were having a debrief. And of course, this was when the CNN reporter had gotten arrested. This was in the heat of all these protests. And even I had it on while I was doing orientation. It was right next to me. I was watching it all. And in our debrief, this is why I respect them so much. They took the time, our pro staff, they said, okay, we know that you've all had to focus on this job and just making sure that these students get in and have that Carolina experience. But we want to do a check-in because we know there's a lot going on in the world right now. And they said, just let anything you're thinking just flow. And people on the professional staff that I had never seen any instance of any fear or anything, they were the ones that would instill fear in us. Oh, they're coming to watch us dance. Oh, we gotta get this right. They just broke down. I had never seen this. They told the stories. Their one-word check-ins were I'm angry. Another one that they could barely talk. They're I'm exhausted. I'm tired because this keeps happening. And it's something I told Daniel I didn't speak on it because you all know how I approach things. It's more existential, big picture. So I knew if I said anything, I would discredit what they're saying, or they wouldn't try to understand what I'm saying. I wanted this to be their moment because they have to let this out. But seeing that experiences did that to them, it shook me. And then seeing the rest of the team, they just listened. And then they chimed in after all the Black people took their check-ins. and they wanted to learn more. They started talking about how they want to use their privilege, how they don't understand, but they're going to do the work necessary anyway. Because like I said, a lot of them realized being other races but passing as white just because of appearance, they know that fundamentally for their lives to get better, they have to change the way blacks are seen in America. And it just really hit. Like even the LGBTQ community, a lot of their strength also comes from the black community, because it's just that shared oppression from the normality that people see. And me growing up, like you said, Hammy, it's a narrative thing. I always felt different anyway, because living here, I had this diversity of friends, top of my class, stuff like that. I never had those experiences. It's just what I saw. And the books we were given in school are all from the European view. It was never, we're always taught history as everything that was European.
You can say it. It's the white view.
Yeah, 1492 and later is what they teach.
Yes, and then it's slavery. The first black people we're introduced to in American history are slaves.
100%.
After the continent of the natives were already wiped out by that same group. And I never really related to that because of my life. So I already felt different. But then me having that experience, I'm still not the same as everybody else, because blackness is not a monolith, and we know this. But the fact that me not having those experiences and them just flooding into me, it just showed how deep that is. Because if I've never associated that into my mind as that being part of my life, and then in one moment it all comes to me, that shows you how deeply rooted it is in our existence. And it's just very troublesome.
Yeah. My final point on this matter really is that time and time again, like DeAndre said, the first Africans that were introduced to us were slaves, or blacks that were slaves. And it's those subtle instances that each black experiences or each black person experiences that define them. And it's so sad, but it's so true. Like that instance that DeAndre experienced, both times, as easily as they had went right and fine, is as easily as they could have not been fine. And DeAndre fairly easily could have not even been here with us, or who knows. I don't want to think worst case scenario, but it's those instances that George Floyd experienced, having having done nothing wrong in that scenario, and look at his legacy and look what defined him now. He's just another victim to a universal problem. And after so long of stringing together all these narratives and what all these people who've been defined by injustice, you would think that something would change. But time and time again, you see, no matter, age doesn't matter. Sex matters, but not to the same extent. Religion matters, but not to the same extent. Socioeconomic status matters, but not to the same extent. So why is it, out of all those characteristics that we just use to define ourselves, why is it that race, out of all the things I just said, creed doesn't matter, why is it that race is the only one that leads to such substantial death and substantial narratives being written on behalf of it, and such derogatory narratives at that? How have we moved so far as a society, like you said, to be able to return our shuttles and spacecraft, and we're on the edge of AI phenomena, but we can't even debunk social injustice because of the color of skin of individuals. I think this is the one biggest flaw of the human race, and I'll say it wholeheartedly. The aptitude to hate and the aptitude to learn subconsciously through these systems, oppression and privilege is really, I think, the biggest demise that we have as not only a nation, but like as the human race. And as far as, like I said, we may go with, mechanical advances or anything we can go in life, or like as a race, or a species, like that is always something that I think has been tied to our past, especially as a nation. And then it's even beyond that. It's just, yeah.
I hate to be that guy, but we are kind of running out of time. But feel free to whatever you guys want to keep talking about. I'm in no rush. Just we've been going for a while. Just keeping you guys updated.
I can wrap it up.
Yeah.
And when DeAndre's done, I just want to play this song. George Floyd was a rapper in the 90s in Houston. This is like one of the only surviving things we got. So I want to play this after everything. It's only 3 minutes.
All right. So I'm going to end it on a brighter thing, because I know humans have that knack for procrastinating to, my child will be the one to do this. The next generation will be the one to do this. We're actively saying that doesn't work. And I think, but I also know that this is the time, this is where we come in, because I've seen people like everyone in this podcast, the potential, the capacity to love, the greatness, the ambition, everything we are, we're meant to do something different. Either we're going to do something the world has never seen, or the world will never see us again.
Yeah. Well said, everybody. Very well said. I just got a warning from my university that there's a police incident. Hello? Yeah. I don't know. They just said everybody at the university, seek shelter, lock doors, avoid the area. More info. I don't know what happened, but I think that's riot related, not 100%. But we had a lot of good discussion tonight, everybody. Rest in peace, George Floyd, and everybody else that's been impacted. Millions. But I just wanted to play this song. I saw it yesterday on Reddit. I thought this was pretty cool that we have this. So I'm just going to play it, and we can end everything after it's done, I guess. Good way to end it. I'm not sharing my sound. All right.
Going down.
This is DJ Screw. He had a radio station, I think, out in Houston. Pretty influential figure, actually, in the hip-hop game. And George Floyd came on, was good friends with Screw. His name was Big Floyd. So let's go.
Man, boys on the stone. Screw Zooter putting it down. You know what I'm saying? Big Floyd representing on mine. So red beard going down like this. You know what I'm saying? Say, watch me lay low, never coming high. I'm a real G, staying high till I die. D-I-E, it's F-O-L-O-I-D. Watch me raise up in my drop top C. Bouncing down the boulevard, watch me just roll. Young nigga like to just let the dollars fold. Let them all fold. Yeah, I'm talking green. Talking about in the hood, sipping codeine, that's the bar. You can call it serve. I'm a young nigga like to smoke a lot of herb. Watch me go fly on the plane. How Mary Jane. Me and the Screw Zooter never full of shame off of fame on my name, cause I'm real. Trying to go real. Jumping out of jail on the bill, staying down. True Southsider. Watch me crawl low on my motherfucking spiders. Welcome to the ghetto. That's Third Ward, Texas. Boys shopping blades on their motherfucking Lexus. Boys rolling butter, some coming white. It's that Big Floyd throwing tray in the night. Yeah, I'm just crawling down the sand, drunk like a band. Fucking with a Darryl, we got it down with the clan, down with black, it can't be no other. Got a damn stallion and she gon' just mother me a steak. I'm dripped up and draped, a yellow hoe with shape, it's Big Floyd on the plate. I'm fucking with the screw and we still going slow. Pass it to the Raz cause he never been no hoe.
That school, you wanna do this? Long time. And it ended. Boys from the stone stepping in regular night, know what I'm saying? Going down. South side, know what I'm saying? Gotta feel us. Raspberry. Finally done it.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed. Had some good conversation. We'll probably have some more good talking points next week. I hope everyone stays safe. I guess I shouldn't laugh at that but I'm done if you guys are.
Yeah.